Hello, and welcome to National Book Festival Presents, brought to you by the Library of Congress. I'm Marie Arana, Literary Director of the Library of Congress, and it's my very great pleasure to present this special edition, the library's annual spring program honoring the winner of the 2019 Library of Congress Prize for American Fiction, Richard Ford. Ordinarily, this celebration would be held in the library's historic theater, the Coolidge Auditorium. This year, we bring it to you virtually for the first time in the prize's history. Richard Ford, winner of this distinguished prize for lifetime achievement, was nominated by a jury of more than 60 writers around the world, among them Nobel Prize winners, Man Booker awardees, not to mention all the former winners of this prize. The list of winners is a veritable cavalcade of contemporary American masters. Toni Morrison, Neil Doctorow, Philip Roth, Dennis Johnson, Louise Erdrich, John Grisham, Marilyn Robinson, among many, many others. The jury includes professionals who hail from different parts of the literary world, notable critics, prominent booksellers, directors of foundations, and a host of those people who are especially alert to excellence in the field. It is the Librarian of Congress, however, who makes the final choice of the nominees culled from those ranks. Here now, with some opening remarks, is the 14th Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, who conferred the prize on Richard Ford a few months ago in a special ceremony at the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. Dr. Hayden?
Thank you, Marie. We cherish the Library of Congress's Prize for American Fiction because it exemplifies and celebrates the best in the literary arts. And I was delighted to confer the prize on Richard Ford during the National Book Festival in August of 2019. His works, his novels, his short stories, his essays are the epitome of excellence and inspiration in the literary arts. And with the prize, Richard joins other luminaries that have received it: Philip Roth, Toni Morrison, Marianne Robinson, and many more. So Richard, we celebrate you again, and we thank you for this special program on the unifying efforts that we all have and need with stories. Marie, back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hayden, and welcome, Richard. Great to have you here.
It's great to see you, Maria. It's a real pleasure. From sunny Maine here, cold and sunny Maine.
Sunny Washington, D.C. here. And we're glad to have you on board. Richard, I want to start by reading the operative sentence that sets out the requirements for this prize. And I quote, "The Library of Congress Prize for American Fiction is meant to honor an American literary writer whose body of work is distinguished not only for its mastery of the art, but also for its originality of thought and imagination. The award seeks to commend strong, unique, enduring voices that throughout long, consistently accomplished careers have told us something about the American experience." Now, every spring we ask the winner of the prize to choose a subject that is deeply meaningful to him or to her. And your answer this year, and it's a truly apt answer for our times, was that you wanted to talk about the connection that human stories offer us, their deep and abiding appreciation for storytelling. And we're calling it "A Good Story Knows No Borders." Richard, why did you choose this subject?
Well, in part, when I was thinking about borders, I was thinking about nation-state borders. That was one thing I was thinking about. And the connection that I was, I suppose, implying was the way in which, because it seems marvelous and miraculous to me, that a little story that I can write down in my boathouse 100 yards from here by the Atlantic Ocean can somehow, by the mysteries and wonders of translation, be not only read, but understood and appreciated and be found useful by human beings that I will never know, whose language I don't speak, whose culture I don't know. That seems to me to be truly marvelous, a quality of imaginative literature. It means that what I know is what the world knows. When Walter Benjamin wrote his great essay, The Storyteller, one of the things he was talking about was that that what the storyteller knew, the world knew, and what the world knew, vice versa, the storyteller knew. It also means to me that we are, as human beings over here in the United States, more alike from people in Namibia or more alike from people in Kazakhstan than we might be led to believe by conventional wisdom. And the literature is the proof in that particular pudding. It means, in other words, the opposite of what the prohibition against cultural appropriation would have us believe. That I can't know about you because you are different from me, and you can't know about me, and we can only know about ourselves. That's just from my point of view, wrong. So that's why I was interested in that.
Well, you speak about your work just now as if it were the little story that you write in your boathouse. But, I'd like to remind your viewers of the great body of fiction that you've accumulated now over the course of your 50-year career.
Ouch.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there, not just a little story that you send around the world. The Frank Bascom novels, for instance, the truly groundbreaking and very American sequence that brought us The Sports Writer, Independence Day, The Lay of the Land, and Let Me Be Frank with You. But there are also so many others, 15 in all. Canada, Wildlife, and your collections of short stories, the most recent of which is Sorry for Your Trouble. Now, these works have seen translations into countless languages, traveling to cultures that you might think would not necessarily recognize your characters and the lives and the situations that you describe in these books. Has that surprised you?
Flabbergasted me. I mean, I think my sense of myself, every writer has a sense of himself or herself, is of that, I don't want to say little boy, but of that young kid in Mississippi who was dyslexic and who didn't do very well in school and who never read a book full through until I was 19 years old. And so for that persona, to be the guy who writes such books that find readerships in such widely scattered places is, to me, almost truly unbelievable, and marvelous and heartening and life-affirming that it could be true.
Well, I want to back up a little bit and talk about your essentially American beginnings, because you were born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi, an area that produced great writers, among them William Faulkner and Eudora Welty. And indeed, Eudora Welty was a neighbor of yours, right, and eventually became a friend.
Richard Wright.
Yeah, right. But your parents were not literary people. Your father was a laundry starch salesman who died too young, and your mother was the child of a 14-year-old mother. And your grandfather, who ran the very famous Marion Hotel in Little Rock, Arkansas, was the one who ultimately taught you life, as they say, from the ground level. How is it that this life lived so specifically in American fashion, locally, and the very gritty American novels that came out of that experience, Richard? How is it that it has found traction in languages that can't possibly represent them in the same way that you do in the originals?
Well, I'll have to assign an answer to that without really knowing what the answer is. But I will say one thing that I know is true and that finds shape and content in the things that I write. My parents loved me, and they took good care of me as much as they possibly could. And I think those are things that I write about. I write about what goes on between women and men in relationships which are ostensibly affectionate and loving, which sometimes break, which sometimes go asunder, which sometimes simply fail, which sometimes turn out violently, and sometimes actually turn out well. So I think that being loved by my parents can't be underestimated. I mean, I could assign a lot of the nitty gritty things in the books that I write to my grandfather, who was kind of a rounder, really, and who wanted me running that big hotel to gain an education from the experience of having to live there because my father had died, and would take me in all kinds of escapades, and would take me into rooms where things that happened that probably 14-year-old boys didn't need to see, but I saw. And so that's the obvious part in a way. I saw people who had committed suicide in hotel rooms. I saw lots of doors open on people who were in rooms together where they shouldn't be in rooms together. I saw a lot of stuff. But underlying all that, underpinning all that is being a loved single child by two parents who loved themselves probably more than they loved me.
Well, I can certainly see why those stories, very human stories, would appeal to somebody sitting in Tokyo just as much as it would appeal to somebody sitting in Siena, Italy, or Dusseldorf, Germany. But you've talked about literature being important to you on the sentence by sentence level. So you write, and I've heard you say this. I write from word to word to word to word.
Yes.
You try to take readers on a very closely curated ride that considers the sounds and the rhythms of the English language, and I've heard you say I use fricatives and vowels, and and I order them all in these sentences. Do you worry about all this highly linguistic curation that you do on a word by word by word level, being thrown aside in the process of translation?
Do I worry about it? Not to worry about it is what I do. I mean, sometimes people in readings in France or in Germany or somewhere where I don't speak the language particularly well will translate back into English something that reader has read in the translated language, and it's very different from what I understood. But the truth is, I probably don't worry about it very much. Umberto Eco said that what a good translation should contain is what he called the anima of the original language. And I'm reconciled, more than reconciled, in fact. I'm quite happy with the fact that in translating a book of mine to another language, the translator is not transliterating it. He's not, or she's not just looking up words in dictionaries, but is in fact trying to find an idiom, trying to find a grammar, trying to find a diction in the second language, the subsequent language, which is equal to, but not necessarily accurately to, what I wrote. So all in all, I feel I'm luckier than I'm unlucky. I do get to work with my translators quite a lot. They write me lots of questions, and I write them back very diligently and faithfully. But all in all, what I tell them is try to make this book better in French than it is in English. Would you please? You translate, you understand this. You are a translator.
Yeah. I was raised biculturally, and I understand there are things that just don't go across necessarily. The emotions do, the characters do, the storyline does. But
the jokes often don't.
But the jokes often don't. Exactly. Right. The jokes very often don't. Sometimes the animals don't. I remember Isabel Allende saying that there was a cat that turned into a rabbit in China somehow in her novels. Richard, what does the universality of literature actually mean? We're talking about the universal appeal of stories.
Well, it means what I said before. It means that what I know can be known by somebody far away. It means that an act of imagination is equally precious in a culture different from mine, and it also profoundly means that empathy is real. That the way in which I try to be empathetic toward what I write, and I don't mean to say toward my characters. My characters, I'm neither empathetic nor not empathetic toward my characters. I don't care about that very much. But I'm empathetic toward what I write so that I can try to imagine how projecting something into the world will become useful to the reader. And so universality to me means not just that we write about large themes, but it means that for sure. We write about the most important things that we know, but that the gesture itself is somehow prized equally across cultures and nation state borders.
Yeah. And when we say across cultures, I mean, this can be across cultures in our own country, across races, across sort of provincial, urban to rural. I mean, the crossing can be in many, many ways.
Yeah.
Crossing of class differences. But what's the goal of universal literature? Literature that has that ambition.
Well, I can only think about the goal in terms of my personal goals for writing books that get translated. I personally hope that I can finish it. I personally hope that someone will read every word. There, we're back to my sort of finickiness about superintending words. Uh, my goal as a writer is to champion my own responses in the confidence and faith that my responses will be, if not synonymous, at least appreciable by someone else. Um, those are the goals. I mean, I guess I could say world peace. In a day like this, world peace wouldn't be bad.
Wouldn't be
Uh,
bad.
but to feel that there are in other cultures thinking, feeling human beings having experiences that are like yours and not dissimilar to yours and not unknowable by you is consoling, is life affirming. I
Yeah.
mean, when I write a story, which basically, and I write, as you know, realistic stories, which asks the reader to draw his or her attention to something in the world through the agency of my story, what I am ultimately saying is not only is my story worth reading, but because you are interested in life, life is worth paying attention to. Life is worth your closer notice. And so, in that way, literature all over the world, translated or otherwise, is life affirming.
Absolutely. And so when you're sitting there in your beautiful seaside home in Maine, or down in New Orleans, you're often in New
Yeah,
Orleans as well.
yeah.
I mean, are you thinking about that now that you've had your books translated? Are you thinking about that person who's sitting in Kyoto who might be interested in what you're saying, or are you writing for some other imagined person that has no nationality?
Well, that's a good question because certainly when I was a kid, I was just trying to get a book written and I didn't have any readers. And so I was trying to write a book which would attract some readers to read all the way through. But then when the books started being available to be read in other languages, the mysteries of translation, then I think I became aware of not a larger sense of responsibility, because I don't think I have a larger sense of responsibility, but a larger sense of opportunity. And so I think by believing that there is a wider readership for me abroad, that it makes me more ambitious. It makes me more aggressive on the page to try to push something beyond where I might stop to where I wouldn't have ever gotten had I not pushed a little further. So yes, I think having readers in Kyoto and having readers in Latvia has made me more ambitious, trying to make what I write, as Walter Benjamin, and I keep coming back to him because he's one of my mentors, to try to make my stories more useful.
You've been compared to Hemingway, and I can see that because of the crisp brightness of your language. You've been compared to Fitzgerald because, and I can see that because there are passages that are so lush and so full of sort of uh, sweet life is the only way that I can frame that. And you've lived with the legacy of Faulkner and the legacy of wealthy Southern writers. And these are all, I mean, there are variations of sort of uh, local writing, local sort of concentration and local stories and characters. Um, is fiction essentially local before it becomes universal? I mean, is that localness that specificity of place important in general universal literature?
Well, it is for me, and it need not be for someone else. It need not be for some other writer. I can only talk out of my own experience. But when I'm trying to make a place be plausible, make a place be visualizable, experienceable by the reader, what I'm mostly trying to do is not localize my story, but I'm trying to create a background against which what the principals, which is to say the characters, do in the foreground. So I've had lots of locales in my stories. I'm never trying to showcase the locales. I'm never trying to aver that because a story takes place in Paris, that it is therefore a Parisian story, or that one that takes place in New Jersey is therefore an origin story about New Jersey. I'm just trying to create a background that's believable, is what I'm trying to do. So while for me, I rather lovingly choose words that I think are interesting words and that refer one to a place, that's about as far as I go. So fundamentally, no, they're not local. They don't have to be local first. And plenty of writers, Mr. Doctorow being one of them, my teacher, plenty of writers don't start locally at all, and whose work aspires right away to what Barry Hannah used to call shooting for the stars.
Right, right. Well, I'm thinking now, because you've made me think of this, in your most recently published book. It's a wonderful book called Sorry for Your Trouble. And it's a collection of short stories, marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. And that first story begins in a bar in the Monteleone Hotel in New Orleans, with that carousel bar. And two.
Like you've been there.
Yes, I've been there. I was like, I felt it. I felt it completely. And two people, former lovers, meet by accident, and they take a walk, and they take a walk down to the river, and then they take a walk back, and that's the essence of the story. But a million things happen. The memories and the whole the echoes of life and their relationship and their own lives are mirrored in this short story. Now, that short story could be read by anybody who might imagine finding themselves in a bar in Buenos Aires and walking down to the Malecón, or they could, be in Nagasaki, meeting in a bar, taking a walk down to the shore. It actually, you don't need Monteleone Bar. You don't need New Orleans. It's that human thing that happens between two people.
Yeah, it's true. Whether the story is any good or not, that's nonetheless true. What started that story was just a sort of one of those kind of things that blew into my brain and blew out the other side, which was that conventional wisdom, and we're always, like my pal Martin Amis says, we're always at war with cliche and with conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom tells us that if we once loved someone, that we will always go on loving them. And that's not a bad thought. But it doesn't mean necessarily that if you see somebody that you used to love 25 years ago, suddenly in a bar somewhere, that you're going to have anything to say, or that you're going to have anything between yourselves. And that's where that story began, and which is why it's called Nothing to Declare. I stole the title from the little sign that's in customs when you come into at the airport, but this is how I work. But I set it in New Orleans because I thought, and this is sort of behind the scenes stuff. I wanted to set a story in New Orleans, and I wanted to set a story there because all of the stories that I had read about New Orleans were so good. And I thought, I have to be able to set a story in New Orleans, which is nothing like all these other stories that I've read set in New Orleans, from Faulkner to Walker Percy to gee whiz, all from Sherwood Anderson. I just thought, no, you have to write a story set in New Orleans. So the setting of the story was one of those things which gets put together with the gist of the story to make a kind of whole. But one was not the progenitor of the other by any means.
Right.
That's a long answer for a rather simple.
A very good answer. Thank you. Now I want to dolly back a little bit and take a big picture view here. Cyril Connolly in The Unquiet Grave wrote that the only true function of a writer is to write a masterpiece.
Yes.
Is that what you're always doing? Are you always trying to write a masterpiece?
Yes. I don't know, again, that I could have said that when I was 24 or when I published the first book I ever wrote when I was 31. But to be writing books now and to have written some books that I think will, whether they last or not, I don't know, or nor do I care, but have found a use within a broad readership. Yeah, I want to write a masterpiece every time I sit down to write a sentence because it's my only life here. And my relationship to my readership is precious. And I want to be as useful to them as a provider of sensuous and emotional life and new awarenesses as I have been lucky enough to be reading the books that I've read in my life.
A wonderful answer. So you talk about life in that answer. And what is writing all of these novels and all of these short stories and imagining these other worlds and your essay work as well, which is and your memoir, which is really quite wonderful. What has all this writing taught you about life?
Well, that's a good question. Well, it's taught me that it's worthwhile. That the acts of imagination are valuable, and that the lowliest kinds of little efforts on the life of someone like me can actually turn out to be more widely usable and useful than I would have imagined. It has taught me that the way in which human beings put together their lives, our lives, is very much the way I put together novels, and that the sense of our life integrity, if we have a sense of our lives integrity, if we're lucky enough to, is very much the way I achieve a sense of integrity by writing novels. I mean, Ruskin said, composition is the arrangement of unequal things. And it seems to me that a life is the arrangement of very unequal things over which we achieve a certain kind of dominion, which we then allow ourselves to say is ours and makes sense. And that's what writing novels is like. So this taught me that, and that's not an inconsiderable thing to know. It makes, particularly when I'm talking to students, and I do talk to students sometimes, that writing novels is like life, and like life is writing novels, which doesn't turn out to be an argument for life doesn't make sense, and neither does your novel have to make sense. Quite the opposite. For me, life has to somehow be sustainable. And one of the ways that life is sustainable is that you think to yourself, it's not just helter-skelter. It's not just all about nothing. It's actually all about something that I assign it to be about.
Now, there's a myth about writers, or a sort of a legend about writers, and I think it's a legend that works the world over. Everybody assumes, no matter where you are in this world, that to be a good writer, you have to go out and live, have experiences, get knocked around a little bit, get your heart broken once or twice, stub your toe, and then go home and be a writer. Are there special qualities that you think make for good writers?
Well, probably there are, but I think a pure enjoyment of language, just enjoying the whole business of working with words every day, the willingness to champion your own rather subjective responses to things, being that that's sort of all you got. Also, Bill Gass, another one of my mentors, William Gass, gone now, alas.
Great.
Oh my God.
Wonderful.
In the heart of the country, great books.
Yeah.
Gass said in his wonderful little essay called Fiction in the Figures of Life, he said that for any body of fiction, nothing necessarily follows, and anything plausibly may. I find that to be one of the most life-affirming, one of the most invigorating things I've ever read in my life, and it's very useful
Yeah,
to be a novelist, for being a novelist. I mean, you're always, when you're writing novels, at a point in which you don't know what to do next. It's not a crisis, okay? You just don't know what to do next. And so you're trying to figure out, what is the next sentence I should write? When I end that paragraph, what's the next paragraph I should write? And sometimes that can stump you, but Gass's dictum is so freeing. Consequently, when I am trying to write about a character like Frank Bascom, and I reach a point when I have Frank doing all these things and it comes to a stop and I've got to write something else that he does, I don't ask myself ever, what would Frank do? I ask myself, what can I make Frank do? I'm taking complete advantage of Gass's directive.
I heard you say that. You've said, I authorize because I am an author.
That's right. Yeah.
That's
It's a mistake. It's a mistake to ask of your characters, I think, what would they do? Because truthfully speaking, without you, they wouldn't do anything.
Absolutely. Now, we're in a world right now, Richard, that is full of incident, that is full of moment, and I don't want to close this interview without talking about this moment in time in the United States of America, where it seems we're in a crucible right now in this country. Cities are burning. This is June 1, 2020. And this program will air this week of June 1.
I hope we're all still here.
Yeah. Oh dear. Well, cities are burning and people are dying every day of the coronavirus, of a virulent pandemic. And tens of millions of Americans are out of work. And now rage is rising over the terrible public murder, really public murder of a Black man, George Floyd, by a white policeman in Minneapolis. It begs this final question, Richard, for you as somebody who documents, who opines, who tries to sort of cradle the world and then give back some picture of itself. Do words matter, after all, in a conflagration such as this one we're living through right now?
Well, they better, because that's our first point of repair. We have to repair to words which are in fact truthful words which have meaning, which have value. Dennis Johnson, in a wonderful book that he wrote about Walter Pater, he said, language is where we find values most convincingly available to us. Language is full of values. So yes, that's not an argument for anything that I'm doing. It's not an argument for literature, although literature subscribes to the same argument. But I don't know if we have time to be reading these days as much as we need to be reading, but we're acting these days. So yes, the human utterance is in itself steadfast, as Mandelstam said. The steadfast of the human utterance is not to be discounted and must not be vitiated.
Wonderfully put. Richard, from the heart of the Library of Congress to you, I want to thank you for a lifetime of absolutely brilliant work. You have been an enormous teacher in so many ways, and your work carries us in ways that only masterful masterpieces can carry. Thank you so much for the work that you've done and for bringing us these worlds and bringing them to a very, very large stage indeed around the world. Thank you.
It's a great honor, and please thank the Librarian of Congress for me, and thank your colleagues for me, and thank you for this wonderful mission which you're in the midst of.
I will indeed.